Joan of Arc entered history as a teenager and really has never left it since. She was born in 1412 in Domremy in northeastern France, and she was a peasant girl who said that she was guided by voices she understood to be that of the saints. And what makes her rather remarkable is not just that she became famous young, it's that in the middle of the Hundred Years' War, she moved from a rural village into the center of this French dynastic crisis. She was in the middle of the warfare and the religion, and then she becomes part of the French national memory. By the late 1420s, France was just in a desperate position. You had English forces and their allies, especially those from Burgundy, who had made major gains, and the French crown itself was in question as a result. Now, young Joan, claimed that voices had instructed her to support the Dauphin Charles, who would be the future Charles VII, King of France. And she was to then help drive the English from France. Now, that claim, of course, sounds rather remarkable or astonishing now, and it was rather remarkable then too. But it gained force because, well, the political situation was so unstable, and Joan really carried herself with this unusual confidence and a sense of conviction. The turning point came in 1429 at Orléans, and Joan entered the city while it was still under English siege, and her presence helped to transform morale at a very critical moment. Now, she did not win the campaign alone, of course, but she did become the symbolic center of this French revival in the war. And the lifting of the siege at Orléans was the event that made her famous and helped her earn the title, made her into the Maid of Orléans. Even now, Orléans remains one of the places that is most strongly tied to her memory. That success then led toward another defining moment for Joan, and that was the coronation of the Dauphin, Charles, as Charles VII at Reims in July of 1429. Joan had insisted that Charles be crowned because legitimacy mattered just as much as military force in the war. And so the coronation was politically powerful because it turned French resistance into something more than just, hey, we're surviving here. It gave the struggle against the English a recognized king. And Joan's role in getting Charles to Reims is one of the clearest reasons that she mattered well beyond the battlefield. And she was helping shape the political meaning of a possible French victory. But overall, Joan's story doesn't end in any kind of triumph, because in 1430, she was captured near Compiègne by Burgundian forces that were allied with the English. And that capture, well, it changed everything. Instead of remaining a heroine, a military heroine that was constantly in motion, she became a prisoner whose ultimate fate would be determined through politics and theology and the law. And what happened next is one reason why Joan's story remained so powerful, because her life is not just this, military story, but it becomes one based in judicial facts as well. Her trial takes place in Rouen in 1431, and it remains one of the most studied trials of the late Middle Ages. Joan was tried for heresy by an ecclesiastical court that was heavily shaped by English interests. The charges were religious in their scope, but the stakes involved here were rather political, because if Joan could be discredited as a heretic, being heretical or by being fraudulent, then the legitimacy that she kind of pushed towards Charles, leading him to become Charles VII, could then be damaged as well. And that's why the trial matters so much, because it was about, the doctrine on the surface, but really it was about the political power that was underneath. Joan was executed in Rouen on May 30th of 1431. She was burned at the stake, and she was about 19 years old. And that death is central to why her memory has endured. She died young and publicly, and under charges that many people would later look at as like, wow, these were corruptly handled. And her execution turned her from a military figure into a martyr in the eyes of many people. Even those who debated her visions or voices or her methods could not ignore the force of, her will and then ultimately her ending. What happened after her death is a major part of why Joan of Arc still matters, because in 1455, 56, there was a rehabilitation trial that was ordered under papal authority that reviewed the proceedings and declared that the 1431 verdict against her was invalid. And that reversal mattered enormously because it didn't just simply restore Joan's name, it also showed that the original trial had been compromised and it had been corrupted by procedure and pressure and ultimately deceit. And so, in other words, Joan's story didn't end with condemnation, it actually turned into vindication. Now, centuries later, Joan's importance will expand once again because she was beatified in 1909, made a candidate for sainthood, and then she was canonized as a saint in 1920. And she became both a Catholic saint and the national heroine of France, a patron saint of France. And that double identity helped explain why her legacy is so, large, why it's so big. Because Joan belongs all at once to religious history and military history, this French national memory, and this broader history of women in public life. And there are few figures who really move across so many categories so powerfully. And what lasts about Joan of Arc is not just, the drama of the story, though the story is dramatic enough. But what lasts is this combination of conviction, her actions, her suffering, and then the memory of her exploits. She was a peasant girl, a village girl who altered a war. She was a prisoner whose trial became notorious. And she was a condemned heretic who later became a saint. And that's why Joan still feels larger than life. Her story never stayed in just one place, one category. And it didn't stay there for long. It just kept growing. It kept widening. I've had the fortune of being able to travel to France on a couple of occasions with students and being able to go to Rouen and to see her church and to be at the spot where her execution took place is quite powerful. And when you see her statue in the Notre Dame in Paris, it's a reminder of just how important and how strong a figure she is to the French identity and to the French people. She is truly one of the more wonderful things and figures in world history. Thanks for watching.